There is a crack in the earth that runs for hundreds of miles through California. It passes through mountains, deserts, and small towns most people have never heard of. And right now, in 2026, scientists say this crack is holding more pressure than it has in the last 1,000 years. That crack is the San Andreas Fault, and it sits right next to the second largest city in the United States. Nearly 20 million people live in the Los Angeles area. They drive to work. They drop their kids off at school. They go about their lives every single day on top of a fault that scientists say is not just due for a massive earthquake. It is overdue, by a lot. But here is the part almost nobody talks about. When this fault finally breaks, the earthquake will not be the worst part. Not even close. What comes after the shaking is what turns a bad day into a months-long emergency that could bring one of the world's biggest cities to its knees. And that part of the story starts with water. We will get to it. But first, you need to understand why scientists are more worried right now than they have been in a very, very long time. The spring that has been winding for 340 years. To understand what is happening under Los Angeles, think about a spring, not the kind in your mattress. Think about the kind you find inside a wind-up toy. You turn it, and it gets tighter and tighter. As long as it stays wound, nothing happens. Everything looks calm. Everything looks normal. But the whole time, energy is building up inside. And when it finally lets go, all of that stored energy comes out at once. That is exactly what is happening beneath Southern California right now. The San Andreas Fault is the border between two of the biggest pieces of the Earth's surface. They are called tectonic plates. On one side, you have the Pacific Plate. It carries the California coastline. On the other side, you have the North American Plate. It holds the rest of the continent. These two massive slabs of rock are sliding past each other very slowly all the time. They move about 1 to 2 inches per year. That is roughly how fast your fingernails grow. That does not sound like much, but here is where the math gets scary. The last time the southern San Andreas Fault broke in a truly massive earthquake was around the year 1680. That is over 340 years ago. In all that time, the two plates have been trying to slide past each other. They have been pushing and grinding, but along most of the fault, they cannot actually move. The rocks are locked together by friction, so instead of sliding, the ground on both sides bends. It stores all that motion as pressure, like a rubber band being stretched further and further and further. Scientists estimate that more than 20 feet of motion is now locked up in the fault. 20 feet of movement that the Earth wants to make but cannot. And one day, the friction will lose, the rocks will snap, and all 20 feet of stored motion will be released in a matter of seconds. That is not a guess. That is basic physics, and the evidence for it is written in the ground itself. The man who read the mud. In the late 1970s, a young geologist named Carrie C. went to a soggy patch of ground called Pallet Creek, about 55 miles northeast of Los Angeles. The San Andreas Fault runs right through it, and C. had an idea that nobody had tried before. He dug trenches into the earth, right across the fault line. Then he studied the layers of soil the way you would read the rings of a tree. Every time a great earthquake had shaken the ground in the past, it left marks, cracks in the layers, soil that had been pushed sideways, sand that had been squeezed up from below. Each earthquake left its fingerprint in the dirt, and those fingerprints could be dated. What C found changed everything. Going back nearly 1,800 years, he counted about a dozen massive earthquakes on this stretch of the fault, and they came, on average, roughly every 130 to 150 years. Some gaps were shorter, some were longer, but the pattern was clear. This fault does not sleep for 1,000 years between big quakes. It breaks every century or two, again and again, like a heartbeat. C had just invented a whole new field of science called paleoseismology, the study of ancient earthquakes through the layers of the earth. And the message from the mud was simple. This fault has a rhythm, and right now the silence has gone on far longer than the rhythm says it should. The last great rupture on the southern San Andreas was over 340 years ago. The average gap between big quakes is about 150 years. That means the fault has now been quiet for more than twice its own average. By its own long history, it is not just due. It is deeply, dangerously overdue. The 2026 study that shook the science world now here is where the story gets very current. In June of 2026, a team of researchers led by Dr. Liliane Burkhardt at the University of Bern in Switzerland published a study that made headlines around the world. They built a computer model that tracked how pressure has been building and releasing along the San Andreas and its neighbor, the San Jacinto Fault, over the last 1,000 years. What they found was alarming. Several sections of these faults have now reached or passed the highest stress levels in the entire 1,000-year record. One segment, the San Jacinto Bernardino section, hit 3.6 megapascals of stress. That is the highest number the model has ever produced for any fault segment in the entire simulation. Dr. Burkhardt said it plainly, the system is critically stressed, but the study revealed something else, something that makes the danger even bigger than most people realized. There is a place northeast of Los Angeles called Cajon Pass. It is a narrow gap in the mountains where two major fault systems, the San Andreas and the San Jacinto, come very close together. The researchers called this place an earthquake gate. Here's why that matters. Sometimes when a big earthquake starts on one fault, it reaches this pass and stops. The gate stays closed, the damage stays on one fault. But other times, when the pressure on both sides of the pass is high enough and roughly equal, the earthquake can jump through the gate and keep going. It spreads from one fault system to the other, and the damage zone gets much, much bigger. According to the study, the stress on both sides of Cajon Pass is now approaching the conditions that have, in the past, allowed earthquakes to punch through and rupture both fault systems at once. A quake like that could reach magnitude 7.4 to 7.8 and would hit Los Angeles, San Bernardino, Riverside, and the Coachella Valley all at the same time. This is not a prediction of a date. No one can tell you when it will happen. But the stress is real, it is measured, and it is higher right now than it has been in a millennium. What we already know this fault can do. We do not have to guess what a great San Andreas earthquake looks like. History has shown us twice. The first time was on the morning of January 9th, 1857. The fault ripped open near a small town called Parkfield and tore southeast for roughly 225 miles, all the way toward the mountains above Los Angeles. It was a magnitude 7.9. Along the Carrizo Plain, a stretch of dry grassland northwest of LA, the ground shifted as much as 30 feet in a single moment. People described trees whipping back and forth and rivers splashing out of their channels. Only about 2 people died, not because the earthquake was weak, but because almost nobody lived in its path. Los Angeles was a tiny, dusty town of a few thousand people in 1857. The same earthquake on the same fault today would hit a region of 20 million. That is what keeps earthquake scientists up at night. 1857 was not ancient history. It was a preview. The second lesson came in 1906, at the other end of the fault, in San Francisco. That earthquake was also about magnitude 7.9, and it taught a lesson that matters even more for modern Los Angeles than the shaking itself. When the ground moved in San Francisco, it broke the water mains under the streets. Dozens of fires broke out almost right away. Gas lines snapped, stoves fell over, chimneys cracked. And when firefighters arrived and opened the hydrants, nothing came out. The city survived the earthquake. Then it burned for 3 days straight. More than 30 separate fires swept through the streets. They consumed around 25,000 buildings across nearly 500 city blocks. An estimated 3,000 people died. The fire chief himself was killed in the first minutes when his fire station collapsed on top of him. The earthquake was terrible, but the fire, made unstoppable because the water system had been destroyed, is what leveled the city. Hold on to that lesson, because scientists say the same thing is about to happen to a city that is 10 times bigger. The Shakeout. 300 scientists built this nightmare on paper. In 2008, the United States Geological Survey brought together more than 300 scientists, engineers, and emergency planners. They were led by Dr. Lucy Jones, the seismologist that Southern California knows as the Earthquake Lady. The calm, steady voice who showed up on TV after every quake to explain what had just happened. Together, they built the most detailed model ever created of what a great southern San Andreas earthquake would actually do. Not just the shaking, not just the death toll. They mapped out the entire chain of events hour by hour, day by day for months afterward. The result is called the Shakeout scenario, and it remains the standard that the region uses to prepare. Here is what they found. The modeled earthquake is a magnitude 7.8. It begins near the Salton Sea, close to the Mexican border. The fault rips northwest at roughly 2 miles per second, tearing open about 200 miles of the San Andreas in about 2 minutes. In those 2 minutes, the shaking sweeps through the Coachella Valley, the Inland Empire, and into the Los Angeles Basin. In the areas closest to the fault, the violent shaking lasts 45 to 60 seconds. For people who have only felt small jolts, that kind of duration is almost impossible to picture. A minute of hard shaking is an eternity. Older buildings fail first. Brick walls that were never reinforced crumble into the street. Apartment buildings with open first floors, the ones built over parking garages on skinny columns, lean over and flatten the floor below. Some older concrete buildings, designed before modern codes, come apart. Freeway overpasses crack and a few collapse. In the Shakeout model, the shaking itself kills roughly 1,800 people and seriously injures about 50,000. Those numbers are awful, but in the full picture, they are just the beginning. Because the earthquake is not the disaster, it is the trigger. 1,600 fires. No water. The moment the ground starts moving, gas lines crack open across the region. Power lines fall onto dry brush. Industrial tanks split. Chemicals spill. And across Southern California, in the Shakeout model, about 600 fires start almost all at once. In a normal week, the fire department could handle them one at a time. Send a crew, hook up a hydrant, knock it down, move on. But this is not a normal week. The roads are jammed with rubble and stalled cars. Freeways are damaged. And when the fire crews finally reach the hydrants and turn the valves, many of them are dry. The same earthquake that started the fires has also shattered the water pipes under the streets. So the fires grow. They jump from building to building through dense neighborhoods where homes stand close together. Wind carries burning embers across streets. A single small fire in a business district becomes a wall of flame that eats an entire block. Then the block next to it. In the Shakeout model, the fires become the single most destructive force of the entire disaster. Fire damage accounts for roughly $87 billion in losses. That is more than the collapsing buildings themselves. About 200 million square feet of buildings burn. That is equal to roughly 133,000 homes. The Los Angeles Fire Department has said openly that it is not built to fight hundreds of large fires at the same time with a broken water system. No fire department on Earth is. It is simple math. There are only so many trucks, so many crews, so much water, and a great earthquake overwhelms all three at the same instant. This is 1906, all over again. Only this time, the city is not home to 400,000 people. It is home to 20 million. The part that should scare you most, everything I just described is bad. But none of it is the worst part. The worst part is the thing most people never see coming. The wound that turns a terrible day into a catastrophe that lasts for months. Los Angeles sits in a semi-desert. It does not have enough water of its own, not even close. The region keeps 20 million people alive by importing water from hundreds of miles away through 3 massive aqueducts. One comes down from the Owens Valley in the eastern Sierra Nevada. One is the California Aqueduct of the State Water Project, carrying water from Northern California. One reaches east to the Colorado River. These 3 aqueducts are the lifelines of Southern California. Without them, the region dries up. And here's the fact that stops you cold. Every single one of those aqueducts must cross the San Andreas Fault to reach Los Angeles. Scientists have counted the crossings. The aqueducts pass over or through the fault zone at 32 separate points. A great earthquake does not damage one of them. It can break all 3 at the same moment, along the same line, in the same 2 minutes of shaking. When that happens, more than 70% of the water that Southern California depends on gets cut off in an instant. Think about what that means. No water to fight the 1,600 fires that are burning across the city. No water for hospitals trying to treat 50,000 injured people. No water for sanitation. No water in the taps. 20 million people in a region that was already a desert before the aqueducts were built, suddenly trying to survive on whatever local reserves and bottled water they can find. And here's the part that really hits hard. Fixing the aqueducts is not a quick job. The Los Angeles Aqueduct crosses the fault through a 5-mile tunnel called the Elizabeth Tunnel. In a big earthquake, the fault can shift as much as 33 feet, enough to slice that tunnel in half, dam it up, and collapse sections of the concrete. The California Aqueduct would be physically pulled apart where it crosses the fault near Palmdale. Engineers estimate it could take between 4 and 18 months to fully repair the aqueducts and restore the water supply. The earthquake lasts 2 minutes. The thirst it creates can last more than a year. The bottleneck that ties it all together. There is one more piece of this story that makes the whole situation even more fragile, and it centers on a single narrow mountain pass. Cajun Pass, the same earthquake gate from the 2026 study, is not just where 2 fault systems meet. It is also where nearly everything that connects Los Angeles to the rest of the country is squeezed through one tight corridor. Major highways, rail lines, natural gas pipelines, high-voltage power lines, fiber optic cables. According to one count, 89 major natural gas pipeline crossings and 14 major electrical transmission corridors run across the fault in this region. All of it runs through or near the same pass that sits right on top of the fault that is about to break. A great earthquake does not just shake buildings and start fires. It severs the arteries. It cuts the city off from its fuel, its power, its water, and its supply lines, all in the same moment. The Shakeout model adds it all up. Roughly 1,800 dead, around 50,000 seriously injured, hundreds of thousands driven from damaged homes, total losses in the range of $200 billion or more. And behind those numbers, a region trying to function for months with a fraction of its water, with damaged hospitals, with broken fuel and power lines, while fires burn through neighborhoods that no one can put out. It has not happened yet. That is the whole point. Most stories about big disasters end with the same line. It could happen again. This story is different, because it cannot happen again. It has not happened yet. The last truly great earthquake on the southern San Andreas was over 340 years ago, before Los Angeles existed. Everything that makes up modern Southern California, every building, every freeway, every aqueduct, every power line, was built during a period of quiet, an unusually long period of quiet, a period that, by the fault's own rhythm, should have been interrupted a long time ago. The United States Geological Survey puts the chance of a magnitude 6.7 or greater earthquake on the southern San Andreas at 59% over the next 30 years. The chance of a magnitude 7.5 or greater in Southern California is about 37% over the same period. And the chance of a 6.7 or larger earthquake anywhere in California over the next 30 years is 99.7%, essentially a certainty. Dr. Lucy Jones has spent decades trying to get one simple message across. The great earthquake is not a question of whether, it is a question of when. No one will get a warning, and the only time to prepare is right now during the quiet while there is still a choice. What can actually be done here is where this story turns, because this is not hopeless. This is the rare disaster that we can see coming, and while we cannot stop an earthquake, we can make the damage far less severe. Buildings can be made stronger. In Los Angeles, many older buildings have already been retrofitted with steel and concrete to help them survive heavy shaking. The city passed laws requiring it, but the work is not finished. Thousands of buildings still need upgrades. Water systems can be redesigned. Pipes can be built with flexible joints that bend instead of snapping. Backup water lines can be routed so they do not all cross the fault in the same place. Emergency water supplies can be stored locally so that neighborhoods have something to fall back on in the first weeks. San Francisco actually learned this lesson after 1906. The city built an entire backup water system, separate from the regular water mains, with its own reservoirs and cisterns and pumping stations. 175 underground cisterns now hold 11 million gallons of emergency firefighting water under the streets of San Francisco. Los Angeles has started talking about doing something similar, but the work is far behind. Families can prepare too. The simplest thing anyone in Southern California can do is store water. 1 gallon per person per day for at least 2 weeks. A simple supply kit with food, flashlights, batteries, medication, and a plan for where to meet family members if phone lines go down. The Shakeout scenario was never built to scare people into doing nothing. It was built to be used. And every year, millions of people across California practice the Great Shakeout Earthquake Drill, the largest in the world. They drop under a desk, they cover their heads, they hold on, and then they go home and check if they have water stored. The clock without hands. There is no countdown. There is no timer on the wall telling us when the fault will break. That is what makes this so hard for people to feel urgency about. The danger is invisible. The ground looks still. The sky is blue. Everything feels normal. But 10 miles below the surface, the plates are still pushing. The stress is still building. The spring is still winding tighter. And every single day that passes without a great earthquake is one more day of stored energy that will eventually come out all at once. The 2026 study confirmed what scientists have suspected for years. The stress on the southern San Andreas and San Jacinto faults is now at the highest levels in recorded history. The earthquake gate at Cayun Pass is approaching conditions that have, in the past, allowed massive ruptures to spread across both fault systems at once. It is a clock without hands. We know the alarm is set. We just do not know when it will ring. Lucy Jones has a way of saying it that cuts right to the point. She has said that the difference between a catastrophe and a survivable event is decided in the ordinary years before the ground moves. In the buildings, we choose to strengthen. In the water, we choose to store. In the systems, we choose to fix while nothing is shaking, and the cost of doing it is just money instead of lives. The fault is loaded. The city sits on top of it. That much is certain. What is not certain is how ready we will be on the morning the ground finally moves. That is not something the earth decides. That is something we decide. Thank you for watching all the way through. Videos like this one take a long time to research and put together carefully. And if you found it worth your time, a like, a comment, or a subscribe goes further than you might think. Stay safe, keep some water set aside, and I will see you in the next one.